What we need is not more medication, but more education, because the best prescription is knowledge. This is Exposé coming to you live from Lagos, Nigeria, every Monday on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook simultaneously. And I'm the regular host, Tony Akinyemi. Don't forget, what we need is not more medication, but more education, because the best prescription is knowledge.
Hello and welcome to Exposé with Tony Akinyemi. It's always my joy every Monday to come your way to bring you wellness information for your health transformation. We have always said on this platform that what we need is not more medication, but more education, because the best prescription is knowledge. In this series, we're dealing with defeating diabetes naturally. And in this second episode, we're going to be diving into breaking down all we have to know as lay people maybe regarding diabetes mellitus. In the last episode, I talked about the two kinds of diabetes insipidus and diabetes mellitus. In diabetes insipidus, there is polyuria, frequent urination, due to the fact that the kidneys are not able to return part of the fluid they used in filtering waste from the blood back into the blood. Everything goes into the bladder, and so the bladder fills up very quickly, and the individual keeps going to the toilet all the time to urinate frequently. That's polyuria. But then there is no sugar in the urine. That is the significant difference between diabetes insipidus and diabetes mellitus. I've given details, sufficient details that we need to know about diabetes insipidus. For those who are still interested in knowing more, maybe you missed the last episode, I encourage you to go back to our YouTube channel and check part 1. Now, so in part 2, what is diabetes mellitus? Now, according to the American Diabetes Association, diabetes is a disease in which the body does not produce or properly use insulin. And let me explain that. There are two critical factors there. One is that the body is not producing either insulin at all, or it is not producing sufficient insulin. In other words, there is inadequacy of insulin. There is a deficiency of insulin. That is one cause of diabetes. The second cause is it may be that the body is actually producing sufficient insulin, but the body is not properly utilizing the insulin, or put another way, the body is resistant to the insulin. Now, what is the job of insulin? Insulin helps to open the door to our cells. Now, every cell needs to eat, and glucose is the main fuel that every cell utilizes for energy. And so each cell has a membrane, like a fence, a boundary around it that encloses it. For nutrients, or glucose in particular, to enter into the cell so the cell can eat, so to speak, the membrane has to open up to allow insulin to go in. It's called membrane permeability. Okay? It should allow glucose to cross the membrane and enter into the cell. Now, typically the cells are more or less closed against glucose. So when there is food circulating in the bloodstream, insulin then knocks on the door of the cell and say, "Open, food is here." Then the cell will respond to the knock of insulin. I'm using layman's language to explain it. The cells will respond to the knock. Insulin is the one that will knock the door and say, "Open, food is here." And then the cell will respond and open. Then glucose will exit from the bloodstream and enter into the cell. That is the job of insulin. It helps to mop up glucose or sugar from the blood and pushes them into the cells, so that the amount of sugar floating in the blood per time is within a certain range. It shouldn't go below a certain level, otherwise it will be too low. Neither should it go above a certain level, otherwise it will be too high. There is a range of sugar that should be present in the blood at any given point in time in a normal, healthy human being. So insulin does that regulation. The moment there's plenty of sugar in the blood, insulin will go to work to quickly start knocking all doors. Open, come and take your own, come and take your own. Every cell will take their own so that the level can drop to the normal level. Okay? Now, when insulin is knocking and the cells are not responding, that's called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance or insulin insensitivity. The cells are no longer sensitive to the action of insulin. Now, so let me go over it again. Two factors that can lead to diabetes mellitus is either the pancreas, the gland that produces insulin, is no longer producing insulin at all. That is called type 1 diabetes mellitus. Or the pancreas is actually producing insulin, but it is not producing enough. That would be type 2 diabetes. Or the pancreas is producing enough, but the body is resistant to the action of insulin. That is also another type of type 2 diabetes. So type 2 can be that the body is not producing enough insulin. In other words, if you want to solve that problem, you have to find a way to help the pancreas, which is the gland that produces insulin, to produce more insulin. You can boost insulin production, and that will overcome that problem. The person is cured. Or if the pancreas is already producing enough insulin, but the body is resistant to insulin, or the body is insensitive to insulin, then what you do is to sharpen insulin sensitivity, or to help the body to overcome insulin resistance, and that person is cured of diabetes mellitus type 2. But in type 1, where the pancreas no longer produces insulin at all because the factory that produces insulin is already dead. Nothing is going on there. All those specialized cells that produce insulin have been destroyed by the immune system in a friendly fire attack. That is type 1. Well, it takes a miracle for such a person to be able to have the pancreas producing insulin back again. That is diabetes type 1. We'll go into more details when we get there. But the definition of diabetes mellitus or sugar diabetes, according to the American Diabetes Association, is that diabetes is a disease in which the body does not produce insulin or properly use insulin. Right. Now, I talked about normal blood sugar levels the other time. What are the different scenarios that can play out when it comes to the amount of sugar or the amount of glucose present in our blood per time? Now, you can assume three scenarios. I said if it is too low, that is not good. If it is too high, that is not good. So there's a normal range. When the amount of sugar or amount of glucose in a person's blood is within the normal range, it's not too low, it's not too high, it's within the normal range, that is called normoglycemia. Normoglycemia. Normal blood glucose level. That's one scenario. A second scenario is when it is too low. The amount of sugar in the body is too low. That's called hypoglycemia, low blood glucose. And the third scenario that can play out is when the amount of glucose in the blood is rather too high. That is hyperglycemia or high blood sugar. So those are the three different levels that can play out. Now I want to give you some statistics, particularly for Nigeria, which is the country where I live right now. Diabetes prevalence in Nigeria. Now, in 1992, there was a national survey that was carried out in Nigeria for persons above the age of 15 years by the National Expert Committee on Non-Communicable Diseases of the Federal Ministry of Health in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. In that study, or that survey that was conducted, it was found out that 2.8% or approximately 3% of Nigerians are diabetic. In other words, 3 out of every 100 Nigerians are diabetic. And according to the Nigerian Society of Endocrinology and Metabolism, it is also stated that 30% of Nigerians who are diabetic don't even know that they are diabetic. In other words, if you take 100 people in Nigeria, 3 of them are diabetic. If you take 1,000 people, 30 of them are diabetic. And out of the 30 people that are diabetic, 30% of them don't even know that they are diabetic. Okay? They are not even aware. Out of the 30, 9 of them are not aware. So about 21 of them are the only ones who have been officially diagnosed and who are aware that they are diabetic. So about 2/3 of those who know that they are diabetic, they don't have their diabetes under control. That is the situation in Nigeria. And that is due to our, carefree attitude sometimes to some of these things. Many of us in this part of the world are too carefree. We are too naive. I'm sorry to use those words, but that's the fact on the ground. And it usually pains me when I see people playing with fire and they don't even realize it. How can people be diabetic and all the signs are there and they don't even know it? And that's why we're doing this kind of series, Exposé. I will begin to show you the various symptoms, the various signs that if you begin to see those signs, you better go and screen yourself for diabetes to see whether you are diabetic or not. It's not a matter of I reject it in Jesus' name. It's not a matter of it is not my portion in Jesus' name. If the signs are there, wisdom demands that you go and screen at least to know your status. If it ends up being that you are not diabetic, praise God. Then you need to investigate why you are having those symptoms. Maybe there are other conditions causing those symptoms. If you are diabetic, there's no problem with that. It can be addressed. All you need to do is to know precisely what to do and how to do it to go about addressing it. And that's why we're teaching this series, how to defeat diabetes naturally. There's no point in living in denial. Okay? There's no point at all. Okay? Many of us quote the scriptures. The Bible says, let the sick say, or let the weak say, I am strong. And therefore, we never say that we have diabetes or we have hypertension or we have any other problem for that matter. Okay? But we forget that the psalmist said, this is my comfort in my affliction. This is my comfort in my affliction. He acknowledged his affliction, and then he also acknowledged the comfort that God has provided in that affliction. So, if you say you are diabetic, you are not stating anything against the Bible, or you are not being faithless. But then you also need to understand that there is comfort or there is healing for you. Okay? There is solution for you in the midst of that situation. So acknowledge it. Don't live in denial. Let me go over the statistics again. 2.8% of Nigerians are diabetic. And 30% of those who are diabetic don't even know it. And 2/3 of those who know that they are diabetic are not doing enough to address their diabetes. 66.7%, they don't have their diabetes under control. That's Nigeria. Now let me go a little higher to Africa, the whole of Africa. I live on the African continent. And so I am primarily concerned for Nigeria and Nigerians primarily, and Africa and Africans in general, in particular, and then the globe, the whole world at large in general. Now in Africa, the prevalence of diabetes in developing countries in Africa has increased by over 200% in the last 10 years. And it may be found in as many as 10% of the adult population in some countries, according to an article written by Professor Ohowuriole in Tel magazine in August 2004. The situation may have even gotten worse by now, between 2004 and now. That's about 18 years ago. Now, epidemiologists predict that if nothing is done to arrest the trend, by the year 2025, just 3 years from now, the incidence of diabetes will increase in Africa by as much as 40%. Don't go away. When I come back, I'll be giving you world statistics regarding diabetes. This is Exposé with Tony Akinyemi, brought to you every Monday on YouTube and Facebook at 8 p.m. Nigerian time. What we need is not more medication, but more education. I'll see you shortly.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to pray at our prayer crusade with Reverend Benga Oloshoyo coming up on Friday, April 1st to Sunday, April 3rd, 2022. Friday 6:30 p.m., Saturday 7 a.m. and Sunday 9 a.m. Venue is the Shepherd's Flock International Church, 18 Sugarless Street off Mobolaji Bank Anthony Way, Abule Onigbagbo Bus Stop, Ikeja, Lagos. Mark your calendars and come expectant.
Welcome back. This is Exposé with Tony Akinyemi, and our focus in this series is defeating diabetes naturally. I've given you some statistics regarding diabetes in Nigeria, some statistics in Africa. Now I want to give you some world statistics regarding diabetes. According to the WHO, the World Health Organization, in the year 1985, there were only 30 million diabetics in the whole world. 30 million in 1985. In the year 2004, that number grew to 154 million diabetics in the world. From 30 million in 1985 to 154 million in the year 2004. That's approximately 19 years, less than 2 decades. The thing has multiplied by more than times 5. It is predicted, it is estimated that by the year 2025, about 380 million diabetics will be in the world. That's again, between 2004 and 2025, a space of 21 years, the number will have more than doubled. The number of diabetics in the world. That's the estimate by the World Health Organization. Now, also, according to the WHO, it is said that 6 people die every minute in the world from diabetes alone. Diabetes and diabetic complications. 6 people die every single minute. So, if we started this episode 15 minutes ago, since we started, 90 people have died from diabetes alone in the world. 90 people. In 1 hour, 360 people will have died in the whole world from diabetes. In 1 hour. It is estimated that 3.2 million people die annually in the whole world from diabetes alone. That's why we need to begin to pay attention to this menace. I call it a menace called diabetes. It's not something we should treat with levity or we should be unserious about. Okay? The good news is that it can be mitigated. You can actually reverse diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes. You can reverse it. I believe it. I've seen it in many people. You can bring it under total control. All right. Now let's go ahead and look at the different types of diabetes mellitus. Now I want you to mark my words. In the first episode, I talked about 2 kinds of diabetes. Diabetes insipidus and diabetes mellitus. Now we are talking about diabetes mellitus, that is sugar diabetes. And now we are looking at different types of diabetes mellitus or different types of sugar diabetes. We'll be talking about 6 different types of diabetes mellitus in this episode. Now, the first type is the one I mentioned earlier, I alluded to it earlier. It's called type 1 diabetes or IDDM. IDDM stands for insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. Type 1. That is the one in which the pancreas is no longer producing insulin at all. And so the person has to take in insulin either orally or through injection every single day, so they can utilize sugar or glucose in their bloodstream. Okay? Now, type 1 diabetes affects approximately 5 to 10% of all diabetics. In other words, if there are 100 people who have diabetes, about 5 to 10 of them may have type 1, and about 90 to 95 of them will have type 2. Now, the second type of diabetes mellitus is what is called type 2 diabetes, or NIDDM. IDDM is type 1, insulin dependent. The type 2 is non-insulin dependent. That's where the N comes from. Non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. NIDDM is the most common type of diabetes that affects approximately 90 to 95% of all diabetics. Now, in the past, type 1 diabetes used to be referred to as juvenile onset diabetes because it showed up most frequently among children. But these days, we are beginning to see type 2 diabetes even in children. All right. Now, the third type of diabetes is what is known as cerebral diabetes. That is the diabetes that affects alcoholics much more than any other segment of the population. Now, the alcohol that alcoholics consume may find its way into the brain. In fact, alcohol is said to reach the brain in less than 1 minute that you consume it. Part of it has already reached your brain. And the alcohol in the brain can begin to dissolve the special glucose that the brain utilizes that is called cerebrose. And that cerebrose is now dissolved and now excreted in the urine. So you find cerebrose in the urine of such people. That's cerebral diabetes. Then the fourth type is what is referred to as secondary diabetes. This is usually induced by, another primary problem, underlying medical condition, or by certain medications, particularly steroids. If a person is on steroids, the steroid medication can induce this type of diabetes. That's why in most countries, when steroids are prescribed for long-term use in people, they also prescribe metformin, glucophage, or any other such diabetic medication alongside, even when the person is not diabetic, because the physician knows that the steroid can induce secondary diabetes in the person. So whenever a person has secondary diabetes, we have to investigate to find out what is the primary disease that person has that gave rise to the diabetes. Once you address that primary condition, the secondary diabetes will disappear. Okay? The fifth type of diabetes mellitus is gestational diabetes, which affects about 4% of all pregnant women. So out of every 100 pregnant women, about 4 of them may develop, gestational diabetes, which is diabetes that is induced by pregnancy. Many times when they deliver their babies, the blood sugar will normalize again. A few of them will progress to confirmed type 2 diabetes even after delivering the baby. Now, of course, when a pregnant woman develops diabetes during pregnancy, that is, if a pregnant woman develops gestational diabetes, that in itself is a red flag. That should signal to the person that, look, you need to watch your diet, you need to watch your lifestyle, so that this does not go into full-blown type 2 diabetes. Now, the sixth type of diabetes is what they call prediabetes, or IGT, impaired glucose tolerance. That is like a condition where the person is not fully diabetic, full-blown diabetes has not developed, but the person is on the boundary, borderline, tending towards it. The signs are there. If you don't check it, you will slip over into the diabetic zone. That's called prediabetes, or impaired glucose tolerance, IGT. I'll give you some facts again about diabetes. Pre-diabetics are likely to develop full-blown diabetes within the next 3 to 5 years if they do nothing about their diet and their lifestyle. That's a fact. Once you have impaired glucose tolerance or you have gestational diabetes, please, that is a red flag. That's a signal that you should be very, very proactive and get radical about transforming your diet and your lifestyle so that you can, at the end of the day, prevent diabetes down the line in the next 3 to 5 years. Now we're going to proceed on to talk about the symptoms of diabetes. Now, when you see these symptoms, they do not necessarily mean that you are diabetic, because quite often when I talk about these symptoms, almost everybody there is saying, oh, it looks like I'm diabetic because I have 1 or 2 of these symptoms. No. The fact that you have 1 or 2 of these symptoms does not mean you are diabetic. It only means that it is time to go for screening. And now it is that screening that may either rule it out or confirm it. If you have not been medically confirmed or diagnosed to be diabetic, please do not label yourself diabetic simply because you have some of these symptoms. Okay? A laboratory test will always confirm or rule out diabetes. Now, the symptoms are about 9 or 10 of them, okay, that I'm going to be talking about. The first one is, again, polyuria. Constant need to urinate, frequent urination. It's also one of the signs of diabetes. Of course, it's not only diabetes that causes polyuria. I have mentioned that prostate disorders can also cause it. Kidney infections, bladder infections, urinary tract infections can also cause it. I've also mentioned that diabetes insipidus can also cause it. Now, again, even fibroid. Some women that have very big fibroid in their uterus, the fibroid is compressing on the bladder. So the space in the bladder is so small that the bladder gets filled up very quickly. Such women will be going to the bathroom to urinate very frequently, not because they are diabetic, but because of this fibroid that is pressing on their bladder, thereby reducing the amount of space that urine volume that the body or the bladder can retain per time. So the first sign for you to go for screening is if you urinate frequently. At least go find out why you are urinating frequently. Some people drink a lot of fluid, particularly towards bedtime. That's why they wake up 3, 4, 5 times to urinate in the night. It doesn't mean they are diabetic, but it's worth the effort to go and screen, to go and check. Number 2 symptom of diabetes mellitus is when there is sugar in the urine, glucose in the urine. How do you get to know that? The first thing that makes you suspicious of that is when you begin to see ants galvanizing and gathering around your toilet bowl in the bathroom, in the toilet. When you see ants gathering in your toilet, somebody in that house may be diabetic. That person may be urinating sugar in their urine, and that is a symptom that needs to be checked out. Everybody needs to go screen in that house. Number 3 symptom is inability to perceive sweetness properly. Now, if you take a glass of sugar, about 240 ml of water, 8 ounces of water, and you dissolve 1 cube of sugar inside, if you give it to certain people and they drink, they will not even perceive the taste of sweetness of sugar in that water, because the taste is not strong enough for their taste bud to pick it up. Because diabetes has a way of numbing, it numbs your taste bud that you are not able to perceive sweetness properly anymore. You may have to put up to 1.5 cubes or even 2 cubes of sugar in a glass of water for certain people who are diabetic to be able to perceive that that water is sweet. That's how bad diabetes is. Now, it is a sugar management problem, and it also creates a situation where you see diabetics loading their beverages and their drinks with a lot of sugar because they can't perceive the sweetness. All right. Number 4 symptom is extreme thirst all the time. Of course, all of us do get thirsty from time to time, particularly when the weather is very, very warm and humid. We get thirsty, okay? And we tend to drink a lot of water because we sweat a lot. But when that thirst is all the time, it doesn't matter whether it is dry weather or cold weather, you just are thirsty all the time and you keep drinking water all the time and it doesn't quench the thirst, then that is a signal, a sign. The fifth one is being constantly hungry and craving sugar all the time, always craving something sweet all the time. That could be a sign of diabetes. Number 6 is eyesight problems, blurred vision. Some people wake up and everywhere is cloudy, okay, because diabetes affects the quality of your eyes, of your vision. Okay, number 7 is fatigue, extreme tiredness all the time because the sugar in your blood is not being utilized for energy. So even though you are eating, but you are still feeling tired. Then number 8 is weight loss, especially in type 1 diabetic patients because they are not able to utilize their glucose very well, so they lose weight very rapidly. Number 9 is itchiness, especially around the genitals because again, when there is a lot of sugar circulating around the blood, it breeds a lot of yeast, a lot of fungi. So fungal growth happens, Candida albicans and what have you, and that creates a lot of yeast infection, particularly in the genitals, both for females and males, particularly in females. And those are all signs. Number 10, if somebody has a wound in the leg or anywhere and the wound refuses to heal in the normal time it should heal, that could be a signal that the person is diabetic. So these are the 10 different symptoms of diabetes mellitus that we will cover today. When we come back next week, by the special grace of God, we will continue with the different tests that can be carried out to screen an individual. The moment you see any of these symptoms, 2 or 3 or 4 of these symptoms, it's time to go for screening. Now, when you go for screening, what should you expect during the screening moment for you to discover or to rule out diabetes? We'll talk about that in the next episode. Again, thank you for spending your evening with me. It's been Exposé with Tony Akinyemi, brought to you by the Shepherd's Flock International Church. Our axiom is, what we need is not more medication, but more education. For the best prescription is knowledge. To be informed is to be transformed, and to be uninformed is to be deformed. Please share this video with your friends and your relatives, as well as your enemies after now. And don't forget to subscribe if you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. God bless you. Have a very wonderful week ahead. And bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to pray at our prayer crusade with Reverend Benga Oloshoyo coming up on Friday, April 1st to Sunday, April 3rd, 2022. Friday 6:30 p.m., Saturday 7 a.m. and Sunday 9 a.m. Venue is the Shepherd's Flock International Church, 18 Sugarless Street off Mobolaji Bank Anthony Way, Abule Onigbagbo Bus Stop, Ikeja, Lagos. Mark your calendars and come expectant.